Howdy, folks. Today we're diving into how a family-run camera store is thriving in 2025 when so many others have disappeared. Right after this. Welcome to Camera Shake, where we bring you the insider scoop on all things photography and videography, giving you a unique opportunity to stay ahead of the curve. And hey, if you haven't already, make sure you sign up to the Camera Shake mailing list over at www.camerashakepodcast.com. We've got some awesome stuff coming up soon, so make sure you get your name down on that list ASAP. Now, without further ado, let's give it up for today's special guest, photographer, videographer, and content creator for Camera Centre UK, Stewart Leigh-Firbank. Stewart, man.
Woo! Yeah, good. I was kind of like, feel like I should have just like come in through the door over there, just like clapping. So it felt like an intro. I needed to get some lights in the background.
Yeah, we need some applause in there.
Yeah, some applause, just really like build it up. No. Hey, how's it going?
All good, man. Cool. Now, for those of for those of the listeners and viewers who don't know you, give us like a sort of a helicopter view of what your role is at Camera Centre.
Oh, helicopter views, long and short story. Okay, so let's see if we can do this in as short amount of time as possible. I used to work as a camera salesman at Camera Centre UK. It was probably around about 10 years ago. Through that, I ended up doing weddings in and around the world. Went into doing corporate photography, starting my own business, and then I took Camera Centre on as a client, purely because I actually managed to convince the owners that it'd actually be a really good idea to start doing content and creating a YouTube channel, because it's actually a really useful tool for companies, especially things like a 4-generational business, to actually be able to, build up a community, build up, people more interested in the actual stuff. I'm more videography based, however, through doing the YouTube channel, I am doing more photography stuff, and it's been a lot of fun. The company has been massively supportive of what I do, and my goal here when it comes to Camera Centre UK is to take away from the so you have your typical review style videos, and that's always fantastic, but what I really like to do is trying to put a unique flair on it, say actually taking out on jobs. The videography or the content of the video is more kind of like story driven, or just trying to have fun, showing it in a more kind of like a work environment, what I would actually use it for, and go out and about, talk to the camera in public, and hugely embarrass myself, because it's just fun, because no one really cares what you're doing at the end of the day, and you can just talk to yourself, which is quite funny, especially when there's new products and you're just being like, this is a new product, and no one just bats an eyelid, which is quite strange, because I'm like a 6'2" massive human being, and people just look at me and just like, oh yeah, I just keep walking. But, Camera Centre UK, like I said, is a 4-generational business. It's managed to survive where a lot of camera companies haven't over the years, and I very much hand that down to how the people who run it do the business. But also, we're not necessarily a massively corporate identity. It's about having a more personalized experience, and that goes through from the shop experience all the way to the online experience. We're very kind of there to help out customers all and more, and we've had some really big photographers start with us and go through their entire career from start to finish, because it's 4 generations old, and it's kind of crazy to see that at some point. So you have people who've been videographers, photographers for 40 odd years, but then you've got like the new starters like M Visuals. I don't know if you know M Visuals, but he bought his first camera from Camera Centre UK, and we are a small local business, yes, but we've got the ability to be much bigger than we actually are, and if anybody ends up watching this from Camera Centre or just in general, we have an incredibly talented staff pool who are also professionals in their field and specialise in varying amounts of photography. We have somebody that specialises in Leica and astrophotography, someone who does corporate photography. I'm videography based, so any questions for videography, I'm your man. I do a bit of photography on the side as well. And we've got like a large amount of experience overall. And I think it just comes to a really good time, and why people have come back to us, and why other companies who've tried to come into the area haven't actually been able to do so, because we've been a bit more flexible. Because with big companies, they tend to not have the same flexibility as us. And it's been going well. The YouTube's been performing pretty well. It's getting up there. We're just trying to produce more and more kind of cool content and do things different to the rest of the competition, at least as where we can.
So you mentioned
you mentioned
Camera Center is a 4th generation old company. Do you know how it all began?
Oh god, this is a really kind of again. I'm not one of the. I'm not part of the family that runs it. The company started with their great grandfather, I believe so, who was actually just a wedding photographer, I believe, at the time. I mean, this was the days where they were using probably large format cameras, medium format, film cameras, and I've had a lot of really brilliant stories over the years about how good he was with general tech and stuff like that. Well, the tech of the time, right? The mechanical cameras. He could take a photo and it'd be perfectly composed, but he wouldn't look down the viewfinder and he would just use the meter readings on the film camera. And that's when you truly know somebody's absolute skill is the ability just to do that and actually get a well composed photo. And then you have then it just kind of ran down through the family. There was a point where Camera Center had this expansion phase where it went through the entirety southwest of England and Wales, and then contracted back in size due to the advent of iPhones and smart, what's called phones with cameras, right? Because at the end of the day, not everyone's going to be buying compact cameras. So what was interesting at that point is the fact that originally, where you'd start being in the industry, it'd be like compact cameras are the one that sells the most, and then the professional cameras aren't. But now it's the opposite. The professional cameras sell the most. At least that was the way for a really long time, until recently, where old compact cameras have become stylish and trendy and cool and, really hip for everybody that just wants to start doing photography or just wants the feel of their family photos from when they were young. You get what I mean? It's the retro aesthetic. So we do a bunch of used stuff at Camera Center as well, and that stuff has been doing really well.
That's actually interesting. So are you saying this sort of the kind of classic camera, or maybe even the film camera thing is come back as a trend? It comes back in a trend. So film cameras were for a long time, probably about 5 years ago now, and then they built up, and they're still really trendy. I just took out, I don't know if you know, one of the next videos on the channel is actually going to be on Hasselblad X-Pan, which is my dream camera, which is weird as a videographer that I would have a film dream camera. But also CCD censored digital cameras. They've become quite popular. And if I'm honest, I feel like DSLRs are going to become popular again at some point, because it's just that sort of I think in this day and age, right, when you have so much focus on AI, everything, from the image creation to just, everything about digital kind of presence these days. What's really nice about photography is being present in that moment and being able to see the light and taking photos, and it takes you away from essentially what the world is at the moment, which is a hot cake of mess and everything. But I think photography, and this is I'm looking to start a community as well with Camera Center on people who are looking to get into it. And I think what's really interesting is just the amount of just being able to be apart from your phone, your digital presence, and just taking photos. Yeah, post the photos, but this is all your story and how you see the world. And that's what I really like about photography in particular, and even to a certain extent with the advent of video. I mean, video is becoming vastly more popular than using photos, with the cameras like the Osmo Pocket 3, massively popular because content is becoming king. And this comes down to AI again, because in a world where we've kind of bombarded by AI imagery, I think what's becoming really important for photographers, at least on the professional and just in general, is actually having behind the scenes content of them taking the photo and then showing the photo, because it shows a bit more kind of honesty. It's showing that this actually happened in a world where we don't quite know when things actually happen. I think that's what's special in particular about film photography, I guess, because that happened in the world because it's a physical thing, right? But you can see why the content
for photographers is popular, where they show a camera first, or something along those lines, like Expired Film Club. I actually had him on our podcast on our channel for a sec, and he's now gone to like almost 500,000 subscribers, and he just talks about expired film and takes photos at sports games, which is absolutely crazy. I'm going on tangent after tangent, but no, it's very fun. I'm a tangent. I love a good tangent. It's the best thing in the world. But yeah, in general, photography is cool, and camera center is also cool.
That should be the tagline.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're done. I'm going to go now. No. Yes. So that's. Sorry. I bet you didn't realize how unhinged this interview was going to go.
Oh, this is going to be fun, man. This is fun. It's one of these sort of recurring subjects, I think, on this podcast is, how, on one hand, how automated the technology has become, especially over the last sort of 6-7 years, since sort of the advent of mirrorless, since the explosion of mirrorless, especially, since the like massive improvements in eye autofocus and, all the rest of it, it's become less and less, in a sense, purely from a technical perspective, not from a creative perspective, but it's become less and less of a skill to take a well-exposed photograph, because the camera basically does it for you,
Yeah, for sure. Right. No, exactly.
Even with a DSLR, you still had to keep an eye on your light meter and make sure, it's things, because you didn't know. I mean, you basically had to take the picture first. I mean, you could review it on the back of the camera, which already is a massive advantage compared to a film camera. And yet, this is probably why I like film cameras so much, is because there is that weight, the uncertainty of, is that shot going to come out or not?
Yeah, exactly. I think when it comes to film cameras in particular, like you said, there is that uncertainty as to if it's coming out. But again, that's something that allows you to be a lot more present in that moment as well, because you don't necessarily have to think about how well the shots come out. You just have to panic about it throughout the entire day until you actually get it developed. But like overall, film photography is quite special in that respect. And what you're actually seeing is a lot of digital cameras then start then start developing hardware to not let you see the photos. I've just done a number of cameras, the X Pro 3, where you can actually, you put the screen back on the other way and it actually shows you the film simulation on the back. And then you've got the Fujifilm X Half, which actually has a dedicated film simulator inside of it, a shooting film simulator, which gives you 36 shots or however many shots you set it to, and it will create a contact sheet out of that image, and you wind up the photo on just like the other one. So it's very much a photography simulator inside of a camera. And then obviously, like I think if we're talking about cameras that they are ridiculously expensive, and maybe one day I can afford one. But the Leica M series, for example, is really designed about kind of like simplicity and taking all of the the automatic eye focus and everything like that. That's just gone. You just got a camera that's just a manual focus thing. And just recently, I had an experience with it by taking a Leica M11 to the Kooks concert in Cardiff, and that was when there'll be a video about it this month, and that was crazy, because I'm taking a camera that doesn't have autofocus to a concert for a very energetic band where they're going to be moving around, and I'm using a manual focus lens to try and grab these photos. And do you know what? I don't think I've ever had so much fun with a camera. Because of that experience was very kind of like, I'm not got a camera that is just like ultimately reliable. It's a camera that I have to really focus on just my skill as a photographer over the years. And that was quite nerve-wracking because, I'm a videographer. That's what I've always classed myself as. But the photos actually came out pretty good from it. But yeah.
It's a nice challenge. I mean, I started out in concert photography. And I remember in the very beginning, I used the camera that was probably best. You could probably best describe it as a hobbyist camera, right? It wasn't like an all singing, all dancing pro camera. I had one lens, which was a plastic Nifty 50.
Yep.
And I shot wide open because that's the only thing I knew how to do. I did that for a good few years.
Yeah.
But it does hone your skill. It hones photography skills that are not necessarily only related to the technical expertise, but it hones skills like understanding what's happening on stage, being able to predict what is going to happen so you're in the right spot at the right time. Understanding the personalities on stage. I would say, for me, I used to be a musician or a session musician for 5 years. And so I understand what happens on stage. And I also understand the different personalities. Sometimes you have a guitarist who basically stands fixed in the same spot for the whole show, and that's just who they are, But then you got other guys who go nuts and run from one side of the stage to the other side of the stage non-stop. Same thing with lead singers, same thing with drummers. Some drummers are pretty much static. Other drummers, you got all limbs flailing all over the place. It's just, but understanding what these people are like or what the musicians are like will basically sort of dictate how you're going to shoot them, because somebody who runs around like a nut, you need to literally think, all right, I'm going to be in the right spot because I know, do you watch him? You go like, okay. So at the during the solo, during the guitar solo, he likes to like stand by this monitor right there. So that's kind of his thing. So I know that when the solo is coming up after the second chorus, I'll be in the right place at the right time, so I can shoot them right there. All that kind of stuff. So that's all skill that's sort of outside of knowing how to operate a camera, so to say.
Yeah. No, that's actually a really interesting way of doing it. Usually, I guess I kind of do that in the back of my mind. I don't really know, but that's the best expression. You get into the flow and the feel of the songs, and you try and make sure you grab as much as possible. Essentially,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now, obviously, Camera Center has been around for a long time. What kind of values or traditions are still relevant today compared to when it first started?
The values and tradition. I think when it comes down to it, it's really customer service, but also being a person as well. I think, again, this is something that's done well, particularly where we are and how we do things. Is people have invested their time and money into us. So we'd like to invest, our time back into other people as well. We constantly have conversations going, and, the Camera Center has built up a community of loyal customers over 40 years that know both the family, but also the guys that work in the store. And in general, it's just, really the core value is just making sure we're keeping our customers as happy as possible, that our knowledge base is really important, because these people are going to be coming into a shop, right, spending, in some cases, a very large amount of money. They want to know that the person selling them is like the person selling it to them actually knows what they're really talking about, right? And the thing that kind of like really shocked me when it comes to stuff that I've learned over my time, because I was a pretty good salesman when I was a salesman at Camera Center, was like, in a lot of cases, people have already searched, and I take this to the channel as well, right? In a lot of cases, people have really searched the specs, and, I touch on the specs, I tell them the specs, but really what people want to know is what it feels like to actually use the camera. Does it work in the way in which is going to be best suited for them? And ultimately, is it a right decision? Because there are some cameras that are great decisions, some cameras that might not be good decisions for them. But equally, those cameras that aren't good decisions, that might be good decisions for other people. And I touch on this, I'm going to be touching on this on the X-Pound video that I'm going to release, right? Because in the first kind of like couple minutes, I talk about the fact that I can only really spend money on things that I'm actually going to earn money from, right? That's a really important part as a photographer, is that. But when you have certain things, certain collector's items like that camera, right? When I worked at Camera Center, it was around £2,000. This day, like we just had one come in mint, and that went for 5,000. It was box collected. So like, even when you're talking about necessarily things that you wouldn't expect would earn money over time, that kind of stuff does. And especially with the advent of, the retro kind of like stuff as well, things come around and they end up being more valuable. I think one of the biggest ones probably is the Olympus Mewtwo. Do you know the Mewtwo?
Yeah.
Mewtwo, I think, was between like 40 and like 100 and something. I'm not 100% sure of the price at the time, but in this day and age, in the climate, it goes for 400-500 odd pounds. So in some cases, your camera collections can be a great way to earn money as well. So like, that's something to consider. I mean, it sounds like a really weird point to make, I know, but overall, like, when it comes to Camera Center and our ethos when it comes to selling and being a part of community is we want to invest our time in with you and talk you through your product properly with the most professional service that we can provide. And I feel like the best way to get that is with professionals that work in the field. There is a family touch there as well, actually having the ability to walk into a shop and talk to the CEO of the company. I mean, what other company does that? You can't necessarily do it with the other ones. I'm not going to mention them in this, but you can probably guess the names I'm going to mention. And, you can literally just walk into the shop and talk to the CEO of the company. Where else can you do that?
Yeah.
For a camera retailer?
Hey, let me just jump in real quick to tell you about the amazing sponsor of this episode, Platypod. Platypod offers innovative camera support systems designed to unleash your creativity. With their stable, versatile, and portable solutions, you can capture stunning shots like never before. And I'm not just saying that. As the host of the Camera Shake podcast, I can personally vouch for Platypod's incredible products. They've become an integral part of the show. In fact, I'm surrounded by various Platypod products holding up lights, cameras, microphones, and so on. It's really helped to transform the way I make the show and the way I shoot at home, in the studio, and on location. But don't just take my word for it. Explore Platypod's website at www.platypod.com to discover their range of products, including the Platypod Extreme, Platypod tripod heads, and the brand new handle, of course. Make sure to follow Platypod on Instagram and Facebook at Platypod Tripods for exclusive updates, tips, and giveaways. By choosing Platypod, you're not only investing in your photography, but you're also supporting the Camera Shake Photography Podcast. Thanks again to Platypod, our amazing sponsor. Platypod, where innovation never sleeps. So in the time that you've been with the company, what's changed in that time already?
I think as we go along, with the advent of more efficient ways to do business, things have developed. I mean, the Wales and West Photography Show is a big part of that, and a big part of Camera Center in general is our ability to be flexible and do a lot of shows. And the Wales and West show in particular has been doing really, really well. Year on year, we come away and the brands have sold quite a bit, but also, people who have gone to the show have also learned a lot. We've had a lot of really good feedback from that. And that's one of the things, Wales and West Photography Show, right? And then you've got more kind of like efficient ways to do business inside of that, working at like more efficient workflows, adding a use section where you can list out all your gear to our site, similar to other brands, and send your gear to us, and we can appraise it, and you can order your stuff online. There's a lot of things when it comes to building technology and everything that ends up coming together to for the company, and works out pretty well. There was always going to be parts of the camera industry that's really hard to overcome. But overall, I think we've got a really talented team, very passionate, and I can't say enough about Terry and Nick. I'm not just, being like, oh, my bosses are great to sell everything, but they truly are, and they care about us. And this is kind of like what's one of the things that I absolutely loved about working at Camera Center is I worked as a salesman throughout my time as a wedding photographer, videographer, and then going into the professional market. I've always kept in touch. If I'd ever been in a position where work hasn't been as good, I've been able to go back there and work as a salesman. And then they've helped me a hell of a lot through my career. And they've now given me the option to do the thing that I've always dreamt of doing, which is this, creating a YouTube channel, just seeing what that kind of experience would be. They invest in people, and that investment happens over a very long amount of time.
Over the past decade, I would say, we've seen a lot of major sort of high street camera shops close.
Yeah.
What is it that made survival so tough for retailers in this industry?
There's a lot that makes it tough, right? Big thing, gray market, Amazon. A lot of the stuff that you see on Amazon isn't necessarily from, it's not from this country. It's been sent to this country, and they don't end up paying tax, which the customer can then become reliable for, but they don't look at that. They look at the price, right? And in some cases, gray market is a lot cheaper. But I think when it comes down to it, and I think why we've continued to, fight off against that for a really long time, is literally because of the quality of service that we provide, and how we like to discuss, talk to people, and make sure that people are happy, be lenient on the price. If we can, sort out better deals for them, we can be a lot more efficient, a lot more well-rounded. We don't necessarily, we can make sure that you're going to go away happy with the camera, and make sure that you're always going to get the service whenever you call, if anything. And if that happens to it, and it's genuine UK stock as well, it's one of those things that there are a lot of different aspects to running a camera retailer that's hard. But the team there, a lot of them have been working there in excess of 10 years, and they've built this business that may not be the most efficient business in the world, right? But at the end of the day, everyone is family. It works really well, and it just, the company has been built by everybody, as well as the 4 generations that come there, and it will be continued to do so. I mean, that's really my part in Camera Center, is building out the social media presence and also trying to build a community. So what I'm trying to do is, we're going to be looking at doing an influencer program, as well as a few other bits and pieces. But even with an influencer program, we can be a lot more flexible with what we do, because we're, yes, a smaller entity, but at the end of the day, we've got the ability to grow and change a lot more than a lot of other people. But the company has also had the experience of the expansion, and, kind of what are the risks in that? Because that's a really risky kind of business move overall, especially in a market that is predominantly online based, right? It is important to have the shops. It is hugely important, and people absolutely love the Camera Centre shop in Cardiff. But when it comes to expanding too far, you've seen it with Jessop's, where they just end up, collapsing in on themselves.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. You mentioned the grey market. Just explain to our listeners and viewers who may not necessarily be familiar with that term. What is the grey market?
So grey market is where, I don't know how much I can really go into it, to be fair. Like, it's grey, so it's a legal grey area where they send products to via, how's that? What's it called? They send products from outside of the UK. In some cases, these products can be a lot cheaper, but the businesses aren't based in the UK, so they don't pay UK tax on them. And this is where, like, a lot of the kind of contention comes in, because, like, you can be liable then for the import duty. You are then liable for the what's it called? The tax on it. And then, if anything ever happens to the camera, you then have to send it all the way back to wherever it's come from, which is not in the UK. When it comes to us, and I think a lot of other retailers are probably feeling it as well, is, what do we do in that kind of thing? We've been able to find a way to keep, customers happy with us. And yeah, it's just one of those things. I mean, people, I think, well, hopefully people like our service, and that's why they keep coming back to us. And it's why we've done well to keep out of the, the black area, of, running out of business, right? And again, I've come from the content perspective, so like I'm not privy to everything that goes on when it comes to Camera Center, but I think we've found a really great way to keep things running and keep improving upon ourselves. So people keep coming back to us. And, you know, I think a big part of that is the content game. Content is a big part of being able to relate to people and, you know, bring people to us and allow it to grow naturally to a certain extent, but also keep things as clear cut as possible. Yeah.
What do you think the biggest misconceptions are that, you know, that people have about buying from a local, you know, retailer as opposed to some, you know, online giant like you mentioned Amazon, for example?
When it comes to it, people, when it comes to camera tech, there's a price to it, right? And it's not your typical stuff that you buy on Amazon, like cables or like, you know, smaller items, right? There's a lot of money that's going to be put into whatever product that you buy. You want to make sure that it's the right product for you. And the only way you can really do that is by talking to someone and finding out about it more, right? And that's really kind of where our role as a local photography place helps out with that. Yeah.
It's, you know, that's very true. The amount of times that I've gone to my local, you know, local camera store here in the beautiful hamlet of Watford, you know, but you know, it's interesting actually because Watford is one of the very, very few places around these parts anyway, where there's still a little privately owned camera store in the high street. You know, it's not a huge store; they don't have a massive presence, but it's still there, and it's super useful because even just to pick up a few rolls of film, if you're that way inclined, you know, and the amount of time that I've walked in there, because much to my family's dismay, whenever we're in the high street, I must go in there. You know, these things.
If I'm honest, I do it all the time, and like it was fine when I was like a you know, a content creator for business. That's what I did, right? But when you know, you're kind of almost the face of the company and you walk into another camera shop, but I do it all the time when I travel because I just like seeing other camera shops. I'm just there like, this is cool. I like cameras. Just I'm a massive nerd on cameras. This is why this is like I love what I do, is because like I am just a massive dork. And that's who I am as a person. Like I can talk camera gear all day. Like, and I'll be happy as Larry, to the point where like, you know, if we're doing stuff outside of work, I'm like, well, you know, the Nikon ZR's got some really great capabilities, you know, the Red Raw, and I'm just really excited about it. I mean, that 4-inch monitor is amazing. They're like, Stewart, shut up. We're having a drink. Let's talk about other things.
Yeah, that could be my wife. It's exactly you.
Yeah.
All the time. Yeah, but it's interesting, you know, I mean, the amount of times that I've walked in there, you know, with a particular idea, like whether it was to buy a particular filter or whatever it was, you know, and then having a conversation with somebody, you know, there, and then you go, well, actually, no, there's something better for what I've got in mind. And the amount of times that I've gone in there and switched my, you know, my attitude or my opinion on what it was I was going to buy is unbelievable. I mean, especially with film, you know, I wouldn't even have. I think I've discovered so many different types of medium format film, you know, that I wouldn't have even thought about using, you know. And that's the thing, because you go in, you go like, it's, you know, Delta 100 or whatever. But it's, you know, there's so many different options. It's really interesting to talk to people.
Oh yeah, no, so many different options, and I was so tempted to you know, the X-Pan I was talking about. So if people don't know, the X-Pan is a panoramic 35mm camera, which technically makes it a medium format camera, but not really, but kind of. It also has the ability to then switch over to 35mm, which is basically your full frame if you're more of the digital kind of persuasion, as well inside of the body. So you can either take 20 shots or 36 shots. It's up to you. And it's just a lot of fun. I mean, the photos, there's just, when it comes to film, you know, and I can't necessarily say, you know, I'm the best film photographer. I'm not. And no one should ever say they're the best at anything. but there is a uniqueness about film. And, and that's the other side. If you're asking about camera shops and like why certain people don't well, is our used collection, right? Because in this day and age, when you want to get into photography, it's so much cheaper to buy a full frame camera than it is to get an entry level APS-C camera.
Yeah.
Just get yourself like a 5D2, a 5D Mark III, and you know what? You're going to take amazing photos, because these are cameras that have been tried and tested in the worst conditions in the world and the best conditions in the world. They take great photos.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not to say that the new ones don't, but
yeah. Same with lenses, actually. I've out of all of the lenses that I use professionally every day, there's probably only 2 that I actually bought new. Everything else I bought secondhand, because there's no reason not to. This stuff, this stuff works 100%. It's if you know where to get it from, and you have a reliable secondhand retailer. I've never looked back. I've saved a ton of money. The gears, some of those lenses I've used for 15 years, and I bought them secondhand back then.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's not always necessary to buy everything super new. That's the thing. But yeah, I mean, especially with, I remember last time I went into my local store, and I was trying to find a solution to develop film at home. And we had a conversation, and they suggested like an all-in-one black and white developer, and I'm like, I didn't even know that existed. Awesome. So, it basically makes the whole process really painless and actually really fun. And
I did do a video on it, because we do actually have them in the store, the Patterson kind of like film development kits you can do at home. I really need to give it a go, but I feel like it would be a dangerous process, because I'd get into it.
Oh my God. When I first started developing at home, I used the Patterson container sort of thing. But then I found a company called it's a very unlucky name. It's an Italian company called Ars Amiga, I think. And it's basically it's a box. All right, it's like a box with a crank that you basically put the film in. You set it up, and then you put the lid on. You put the developer in, and then you crank the thing, and it automatically winds the film onto the spool and runs it through the developer. And it's such a super easy process. No need for developer bags or like dark rooms, anything like that. You can do it on your living room table, and it takes 6 minutes or whatever, if you're using HP. But it's the easiest process I've come across. It works every time. And it's just a fun thing to do. So I love the whole process of developing film, after I shot it. So to me, I love the whole process. I love the whole, like, taking your time once you're going out and shooting, but I also love coming back home and then actually developing the thing. And I built myself a little scanner box out of black poster board, where I can slide in an LED light at the bottom. And then I've got like a film holder, almost like on a second level type of thing. Yeah. And it's so I build it so that you can put a macro lens over the top, and then scan your own images. And it's just super big. And you literally just pull the film through, go click, put it through, click, put it through, click. Yeah. And then you've got all digitized, and if you go. So it's a super easy process. It's a bit of a it's a bit of a prototype type of thing, but it works fine.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
That's the thing. But yeah, I love the whole process. It's
great. Yeah, and I mean, it comes down to with film. Like I talked earlier about kind of like the digital kind of like, and everyone seems to be in their phones and stuff. What's great about film is it's a really kind of kinetic experience from the start to the end. You got the click of the lens, you got the feel of the shutter as it smashes back down and is really loud. I've got a funny experience which I might go into a bit later with that. But like overall, from that to actually then developing at your house, if you like to do that kind of stuff, it's this entire experience that just ends up being like, I've done this, I've achieved this. And what you don't get with certain things like AI developing, I mean, it's getting crazy right now, but you don't get that gratification that you were there in that situation, or you've been through the situation from start to finish. I mean, I could edit all of the stuff that I do professionally on an AI platform, and in some cases that might actually be a thing that I do. But I like the kinetic experience of going on Lightroom and being like, oh, I'm going to mess with this color. Oh, I'm going to draw a really bad mask around this, and hopefully, it'll work out. There is intention, there's learning, there is developing, there is the entire process throughout it all. You end up learning something and becoming better as it, overall.
There's also there's a sense of magic almost to it, because I remember the other day, only a few years ago, only a few weeks ago, I developed a roller film at home, and my 14-year-old daughter was with me, and we were, so we went through the whole spiel. Then the development process was done. I took it to the sink, opened the lid up, put out the chemical, started, washing out the film. And then when we pulled the roll out and she could see these images, the negatives having developed in the film, her face was like, whoa, it's such a great thing to see. It's really a moment, the big reveal almost, so that makes it so beautiful.
I think the thing to kind of like link it down to, or just kind of like put it to, is the idea of wonder. I think it's intrinsic to us as a species, and although we experience more wonder when we're young, when we're with our father or mother, and we're just kind of like experiencing that. Sorry, I just had someone ring me. I don't know if you heard. Train of thought just completely derailed. No,
that's okay.
No, it's that the idea of wonder, right? So like, when you have that experience with your father, your family member, where you're developing film with them, or you're taking photos with them, it's this entire kind of like thing that's going to be with you for life. And then, you take that to the photography that you do. You go for a hike up a mountain, you see a beautiful landscape, and you've got the wonder out there, you can see it, and then you take the photo, and then the photo you've got for the rest of your life. And yes, it's just maybe a digital, maybe a film image, right? But you can then point that to, you'll be like, this is a photo that, I was there, I did this was me, I existed, which I think is more intrinsic to kind of like, printing it out. And I think to a certain extent, if you do it well enough on socials, it comes out on there as well. I was here, I enjoyed this, I experienced this. And it's what I enjoy about doing live concert photography as well, because it's like, I was there, I was there in Cardiff when the things like, if I had the one thing I really wish I was able to do, I just couldn't get into doing it, was go to the Oasis gig in Cardiff, because it was the first stop on their tour for the Oasis. It's the experience, right? Everything's about experience. Everyone's about experiencing that wonder and being able to capture it.
Now, I think it's super important for camera stores, in general, to reach younger audiences.
Yes.
How do you guys at Camera Center go about? What is your strategy to bring young audiences into the fold?
Yeah, I mean that's it. You've got to be able to bring younger audiences into the fold, and we get that with the film, and I've been doing it for a really long time. Over the past 2 years, whilst I've been working as a content curator solely for Camera Center, that's been my job, really. To work out ways of doing it. And there are a lot of ways to do it, and there are a lot of things that have been really tried and tested with a lot of people. And sometimes it's like putting a load of money down on ads, but sometimes that may not be the best place to actually put the money to reach a better audience. Because some people might want to go speak to somebody, and how best can we help out creators by bringing us all together. And this is kind of what the influencer program, when I launch it, will be all about, is to kind of like bring other photographers and help support them in a myriad of different ways, and see what we can do as a company to do that, especially when it comes to Wales and the local area. But further on, social media content creation is becoming super important. But the biggest thing with review videos, I think, that's becoming quite hard is that it's such a saturated market online, because everyone does reviews on camera gear. So how can you make that more interesting? Now, the videos that I find that perform the best on our channel, right, are the videos where I've got a project, I'm showing something off. So like one of our best performers was a video on the 17 to 40 millimeter f1.8 from Sigma that was for APS-C. And I took the XE5 that just released a couple of days earlier on a 3-day shoot at a gig called GemFest. And it was such a crazy experience overall. I got some really incredible footage, and I'm usually an FX3 shooter. That's what I shoot day to day. And it did 36,000 views just by itself, and it was really quite unexpected for a more niche product, because we're not necessarily pushing things via YouTube financially in terms of just like making it turn up in front of people. We're seeing what is the benefit of building up something more honestly and getting viewers that are actually going to be interested in what we do. And hopefully that comes across on YouTube. And then hopefully it'll come across the interactions that we're looking to have with influencers, and overall build up that community. And another part is I started doing, I don't know if you've seen, I've relaunched the podcast on our channel now. But what we're going to be doing it with is a guy called Tom Wilkins, who's a photographer that has only really just started doing things. But he's been building up his social media presence quite quickly online, and he's been local to Cardiff, and he's just been going out trying to create a positive message about photography, where he goes up to people and is like, hey, you look cool, is there I ever take a photo, don't pose, just be yourself. And he just takes the photo of just that person. And there's a lot of power in that, right? And I've been out with him, and he's been in a number of our videos, and it's been an experience to just kind of like listen to the people that come up to him and was like, hey man, I watch your video, I really want to get into photography, what's your experience of photography? But this is a guy that's not necessarily done photography for too long, and I just want to preface that with, he is a really talented guy and photographer. I'm not dissing his skills, essentially. So like I was just like to him, it's like, man, you've got a community here, like what can we do? And we're looking to build up a community of photographers that are looking to just start out, or just want to find somebody to shoot with, that want to do like street photography, or maybe we'll do the photo walks by a camera center with them, or do all these different things and reach out to other market areas that we don't necessarily have, look to produce content out of that, show them off and help them grow, and hopefully help us grow by helping them out. It's all about kind of like investing in people. And you did ask me earlier about kind of what is one of the biggest things that Camera Center is about, and that's really about investing in people. We invest our time. In some cases, we know that we build these relationships with people, and we invest in their work. We become fans of them. We enjoy what they do, and we want to see them succeed, and we can help out with that.
So on the YouTube channel, how do you decide what kind of content to put on it?
Okay, so when it comes to Camera Center, it's we're a tech company, so being able to have access to the latest camera tech usually performs the best. And then you're looking at kind of like videos that will perform well over like a legacy period, that don't necessarily perform well right now, but they're just kind of questions people have, like how to expose, what's the exposure triangle, or the difference between APS-C and full frame cameras, the different types of cameras. These are all kind of like things that people will ask, and it's legacy content. It's just stuff that's just going to be there. It's tutorials. It's stuff that people will ask questions for. It doesn't need to be a crazy performer. Just needs to get to the point and help out people looking to start out. And we have the more kind of like in-depth videos. And a lot of conceptual stuff. So like, I'm all about kind of just like trying things that haven't necessarily been done as much before, or, you know, adapting formulas that have related to me as a viewer, being maybe like slightly younger than a lot of like people who generally buy cameras. You know, what can I do to that? You know, make it a bit more fun. Hey, we've got a bunch of lenses coming from a manufacturer. What can we do? Okay, we got some like what's it called, thermal imaging binos. Let's see if we can get a hold of someone that has like birds and do a Top Gear-esque episode with me, Tyler, and one of the older guys that have been a part of Camera Center extended family for a really long time. And we did this. It was on the Hick Micro kind of like thermal imaging bino, and we did it like a really kind of like Top Gear-esque kind of like more kind of like funny experience, showing off a product, but, you know, overall a really good journey. I have to send you the link to that one. It was one of my favorite videos. Didn't necessarily perform as well, but every now and then you need to do something that has potential, and you don't know what the potential is going to be until it's done. Some of the most successful videos are the videos that I've been like, why I'm applying my own work to Camera Center, right? And I don't know if this video is going to do well. Like the GemFest, that was a client of mine. That's not Camera Center's client, that's my client outside of Camera Center. And they were happy with me creating videos out of it as well. So, you know, make sure it was okay. And it gave people an actual kind of like experience as to that day, as to what the lens would actually feel like and be like in a really professional run and gun situation. Yeah, words.
Cool. Now, you're also involved in the Wales West photography show.
Yep.
What role does that play in like connecting with the community?
When it comes to the shows in particular, we do a number in the UK. We also work with the Society of the Photographers, who also come to our event at Wales West as well. When it comes to our show and the feedback that we've had from it, people have had longer time to be able to talk to the retailers and the talkers to really get their point across. In these a lot bigger shows, again, I'm not going to mention any names, you can probably guess, you know, it's harder to do that. And what ends up becoming the case for a lot of people when it comes to exhibitors, and then also, you know, the brands there as well, and the people there, they have a lot more time, the brands, and we end up doing better overall and happier with the experience because we've really helped out a lot of people get the things that they want to get. And that was what it comes down to. It also, you know, great deals. You know, have a lot of really great show deals at that time. And if you're looking to pick up anything, it might be a little bit cheaper to do it at that point. But, you know, there's a lot of different aspects when it comes to Wales and West that I find fantastic. And every year it's growing bigger and better and more badass. And it's what I usually say when it comes to a lot of the marketing that we do for it, is that the thing, you know, bigger, better, more badass. Yeah, you use a little bit of like maybe fringe lingo, I guess. But, you know, we are a company. We're not a massively corporate company, but we do things well. You know, it's like battle tested brothers there. Do you know what I mean? Like there's the family, and then there's the extended family that is all around it, and it's been a part of everybody's life for such a long time, and it's just become a thing. And Wales and West is very much like that as well. You know, we get all of our customers from over the 40 years there, but we also get like a lot of younger audience there as well. And it's just a great experience, you know, hanging out with some of the best photographers that have been sent to the show for us to, you know, showcase, but also they can do some speaking. You know, 1 week, 1 month, 1 year, we had Philip Bloom there, you know, amazing cinematographer. Just loads of names. I'm really bad at remembering all the names, but we've had a lot of really great names there. And Wales and West, I think, is a really powerful tool for us. And to a certain extent, where like everybody, all of the other retailers end up, you know, looking at us coming to the show and being like, we need to be doing stuff, which is only going to be good for the industry, right? And yeah, it's about getting people involved in photography, and that experience overall, be it workshops, be it, you know, great deals to your first camera, and that's it. Like when it comes to passion about photography, I feel like we need to make it generational, because there was this great thing that was said in a documentary that I was producing a little while back. And it was just like, without creative expression, creative ideas, then we just live in a world at war, right? Because when it comes to everything and how the arts have actually helped us develop as a society, we wouldn't be here without the ability to be able to write down the text, right, of how to do certain things. Everything, when it comes to human kind of evolution, kind of comes from a certain thing, and photography is a big part about documenting that process. You know, it's had the ability to stop wars, to show things in certain light, to be able to like interact or be able to see our favorite artists there. You know what I mean? I think photography is a really powerful tool, and without it, without the arts, just in general, I think we would be in a dangerous place.
You know, the thing I love about shows like that in general, I use the photography.
Oh yeah, that was about Wales and West. You need to tell me if I go on tangents, because I like going into the. I'm like, yeah, let's talk about the philosophy of photography.
Well, that's you know, I think you're bang on, as we say over here in the UK, because you know, the thing I love about photography shows like that. I just used TPS, the photography show in London, Birmingham, as an example. Or I mean, I could use Imaging USA as another example. I love that amalgamation of, you know, product and hardware and all the rest of it, and education, because I think the educational part is so super important. You know, what I love about TPS is that, you know, you've got these open stages. You walk around the show floor, and you might just walk past some talk or something that's happening on a stage just by sheer coincidence, you know, and you catch something that you know, piques your interest, and you go, oh, okay, well, that's an interesting thing. And then you stick around, you listen to that, and you go, oh, I've learned something awesome. And because these stages are everywhere, I just love the fact that you're in it. You know, you're in the educational bit. What I really liked about TPS this year was that they added this whole content creator section to it, you know, where they realized, you know, video is becoming more important, but not only that, it's also content creation on your phone, and, you know, and all that kind of stuff. So there's a whole section there that was really just geared at that. And from what I could see, that was super popular. That, I don't know, did you go to TPS this year?
I did go to TPS this year. It was a lot of fun, you know, heading into London. I think to a certain extent, there are aspects which I was just like, may not be the best idea to do a photography show like that in London, but, you know, they managed to pull it off. My biggest thing is like, if you're looking to go and buy something at a trade show, would you really want to go into London, park up, but also, you know, in many cases, park away from the thing and then have to go through the tube? Anyway, that's just like just kind of like thinking about it.
It's not. That's a valid point, you know. And the thing is, it's her swings and roundabouts, because you know, previously it's been in Birmingham at the NEC, and it's I think what's happening now is that it's alternating between London and the NEC.
I think the NEC is a really good place for them.
It's a really good place, but here's a big but.
There's a but.
Yeah, there's a but. Yeah, so I know that from international visitors and exhibitors, there's always been a bit of a criticism that, you know, you can't really fly from, you know, New York City into Birmingham. You have to fly into London, then you have to make your way up to Birmingham. I think
it's I thought you probably would have been able to get a flight to Birmingham from New York, to be fair.
I know. I mean, normally they fly into Heathrow or Gatwick. You know, so it's, you know, I know that from, as far as international travelers are concerned, Birmingham has always been a bit of a pain in the ass. Pardon my French. Let me rephrase that: pain in the backside. You know, and so it's like, you know, it's one of those things. I think what they were trying to do, they were hoping to get more of a London audience, because obviously if you're already in London or in the surrounding areas, you know, you're probably going to be more enticed to go to the show if the show is in town, rather than having to get on a train and travel up to Birmingham and blah, 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 you know, all that kind of stuff. And of course, the other thing I think that they were thinking, and I don't know how successful that was in the end, but I think part of the thought process was, you know, if you're in London, maybe you'd actually come to multiple days. Because this is the thing I know from people that I know in London, they might travel up to Birmingham, but they're really only going to do that for one day.
Yeah.
And then they're going to hit the train and come back into town. Whilst if you want to stay there for multiple days, you're really going to have to, fork out for a hotel room. And the NEC is not exactly in town, so you're going to have to stay somewhere around the area. And everything's like 3 times as expensive. So I think it's like a, plus minus type of a thing.
I think, something that's going to be weighed, and, it's kind of up to their, like, the idea that I would pitch to them, right? And stay with me with this one. I feel like they should invest in their own airline that airdrops people there. So they could just, like, jump out of the plane, parachutes in hand, photography gear, go full Rambo into there. Sounds, I think, in terms of a business decision, that would be fantastic.
Yeah.
All jokes aside, they do a great job at the photography show. It's fantastic. I genuinely can't knock them.
I think what's really good, and again, this would be my criticism about the London location. And this is the thing I've always really loved about the NEC. Is the community building up there. Because for me, I'm usually at a show like that, I create an episode of the podcast at the show, so I'm there for the whole duration of it. And it's purely from a networking point of view, or from a making contacts and building relationships and making friends type of thing in the industry. It's what happens after the show is so much more important than what happens at the show. Once the show shuts at 5:00, it's whatever happens in the bar afterwards. Okay, that's such a big part. Yeah, a big part of it.
So
I love
being able to network, talk to a lot of people. Build up these kind of relationships.
Absolutely,
it's definitely something camera centers are good at doing when it comes to the shows. It's all about being able to build a community, build up trust in yourself, and ultimately, and you can see this across kind of like marketing strategies across the board. People now invest in people, and that's what they want to see more. And the show's a really great chance to do it because people get to actually meet people, but also the way in which you conduct yourself in general. People have flaws, they also have strengths, and people like the fact that they do.
It's people will always sell to people, it's you always make connections with other humans. And the thing with, again, I come back to the NEC, for example, as opposed to the London location. At the NEC, everything is really contained, like all the hotels, all the bars. It's all one. There's one little lake in the middle, and everything's around there. So
I love the NEC for that. I love it.
It's like Imaging USA. It's always the whole at the Gaylord Resort. Everything's in that resort. The hotel's there, the expo floors are there, the restaurants are there, the bars are there. Like, everybody's there. You walk around the compound, and then you bump into Jerry Gionis, or you bump into like whoever, right? Peter Hurley. I bumped into Peter Hurley in a whiskey bar dive. That's
that's great. I mean, that's the best place to meet people. Really,
the best place. Yeah. That was a hidden boozer. It was nice.
Yeah, no, definitely, for sure. And that's a part of just like going to these shows, but also just doing photography every now and then. Just take a random tour. Just be like, you've got an opportunity, take it. Yeah,
absolutely. But again, it's all about community building. I like photo walks for the same reason, because you get to meet other people. There are photo walks at shows like that, for instance. At TBS, you can sign up for photo walks. It's just a great way of meeting other people. And generally at shows.
Fair enough. The only thing I would say about the London place is that the actual like main kind of like corridor feels very kind of like, that city that they're looking to build into a desert. That's just like that infinite line.
Yeah.
I just feel like, and that's why I feel like the NEC is better. Is because everyone just kind of like it culminates all together.
The Excel, for those international listeners, the Excel Expo Center in London is humongous, and there are so many expos going on at the same time. It's just everything is
like they need like a tram that goes to and from, just like a little shuttle.
Well, there
catapult.
is
Also, that would be great.
There's a DLR that basically goes. You've got two stations on either side
Yeah.
of the Expo, but this is the annoying thing about the XL is that the hotels are 2-3 stops away, so you have to get on a train and then hike it back to your hotel.
And this is what I said earlier about, you know, people going to these shows looking to spend a lot of money. I don't want to be going through the underground with, in some cases, maybe even 30 grand in my bag. Do you get what I mean? Like, yeah,
it's definitely there's some pros and cons. I mean, I thought the way that the XL is set up, it's not ideal for that kind of
not
thing.
ideal. It's great though. They did do a really good job. Again, genuinely not knocking them. I just my mind state is just like that basically.
I tell you what I did like this year. I went on a number of shoots in town in the days leading up to the show, and in that respect, being in London and being able to go out with the Adobe team, for example, and we had some models, with a bunch of Viking models, and
that sounds cool. A little bit out place in the middle of London, but equally, I mean, Doctor Who time travel could work.
So it was, that was a fun thing. That was quite interesting. But so how do events like this for you guys, as far as the Wales and West photo show is concerned, how does that translate into long-term relationships with your customers?
It's a chance to long-term relationships have built up over a long time. Trouble is where do long-term relationships start? They start in an instance. They start at a point. Like the other day, I say that I'm not a salesman at Camera Center, but in some situations, like I can't necessarily help out with selling things, right? Because I can help people get to places, but I am, the content creator. That's what I do. And this is going to come back to Wales and West. It's not a tangent, private, I promise you. So I go into the shop. There's this family there, and there's this kid. He's just like, I'm really loving photography, and I really want to go for the 150 to 600 Sigma. And I'm like, okay. And parents go, how much is that? It's just like, it's a lot of money. It's like, I say the price of it, and they're like, oh my God, this is a kid's camera. So like, they're not expected to put like over $1,000 into it. I'm like, look, from my experience from starting out, this is where I started. The 70 to 300 Tamron. You've got a, Canon DSLR. It's going to be absolutely perfect just to start off with. And, seeing that thing from such a young age, that's where it starts, and it can start throughout that time period. And it can be from a moment where they come to Wales and West and they've gone through and talked to some of the people there. And, we have a bunch of people from Camera Center that walk around and talk to people and see kind of like their experience of the show. And then, experiencing the people doing the workshops and stuff like that. And it's all about kind of reaching out and building up the content around it. Yes. And building up the initial relationship in hopes to make it a long-term relationship. Because the biggest thing people are trying to do right now and companies are trying to do is break it into a younger audience, as it's like one of the biggest things within the industry is it's like we need to build a younger audience. It's nothing to say that the older audience isn't important. It's massively important. And, we've built up a lot of these relationships over time. But breaking into a younger one is like one of the things that's just like super important.
I think it's interesting to see how, the industry has changed over the last 10 years.
Yeah.
But if you think about 10 years from now, how do you think camera stores would have changed over the next 10 years? Do you think it's going to turn more into like a creative hub?
It's hard to guess what it will be in 10 years. I think Camera Center is one of those things that, and fingers crossed. I think it's going to be one of the things that go into the future really well, as we have learned to adapt in the future. But it's all about that. It's all about being able to adapt to your situation and how things work at that particular time. There are some things that are more profitable. There are some things that are better to invest in. And ultimately, what's the most important is making sure that people come to us and have enjoyed that experience and have related to us in such a strong way that they kept coming back. And this comes down to this is one of probably another 3 or 5 stories that I'll tell during this podcast because I like to go on tangents. When I was in university doing this, I was just like, well, my university's come to an end. I need to start looking at cameras. I walk into a camera shop. I'm not going to say which one. I walk into a camera shop and I was like, oh, no, I'm really, really interested in, in this stuff. I couldn't afford jack, whatever, I'm like a poor student at this rate. And I'm like, I'm asking the person, I'm like, what can they do? And they wouldn't give me the time of day. I'm a student. I'm not going to give them any kind of money. This person didn't care about it. I walked into Camera Center and I was ended up talking to them about 3 or 4 hours just about camera tech and, what their experiences are and stuff like that. Maybe not 3 or 4 hours, but I was there for a while, right? And yes, that was kind of like maybe me wasting time or something like that. But I had a better experience with that shop because they were ultimately treating me like a human. And that relationship developed further and further. I ended up becoming a salesman. And, I was a good salesman, really good, and start building up my professional career alongside, which, they're really happy to support because at the end of the day, that's the goal for a lot of people that want to get into this is work it professionally. But even then, you don't necessarily need to. But it's one of those things where people, I think, the best place to invest is the place where the interest is starting, if you get what I mean. And the biggest thing to realize is that the time invested in someone when they're young or they're starting out or they're thing is the best time to do it because they're growing. They can build, you can help them shape themselves into a photographer, let them do their own creative expression, but just help them along the way. Could be the one that they want to come to. Yeah.
Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about...
If that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I want to swing the conversation around to some product talk because I know you're an absolute product.
Yeah. Let's talk about some product. Yeah, exactly. That sounded better in my head. Sorry.
Right.
Yeah.
What's the thing that's buzzing right now? Like, what's the latest?
The latest thing that's buzzing? I think lately there's been a big kind of like. So you have this camera, the FX3. Do you know the FX3? Yeah. I'm guessing you do, right? Massively popular camera. I think it's like I have an FX3. I like it because it's the most reliable camera I have ever owned, and that's a full stop to that situation right there. It's great in low light situations. I know if I'm going into the depths of hell that I'm going to be coming out with some freaking kick-ass content, right? Sorry, I swore. I do apologize. Yeah, that camera's awesome. And it's been the king of content for a really long time for both content creators and videographers, not photographers. It's only a 11 megapixel sensor. Then Canon come along and they're like, yes, check out this. This is a C50. It's not quite as good as no light, but you can do really good photography with it. It's got all of the added stuff, and it does this magical thing called open gate, which everyone really likes. And to be fair, the open gate on that camera is beautiful. I have used it. Very much recommend. And that camera is fantastic. And then Nikon were like, do you know what? We're finally going to release this collaboration that we've done with Red, which is the cinema camera company, and we're going to release the first one. But what we're going to do is we're going to price it at a super enticing price because it's the same price as the FX30, which is the camera underneath the Sony, and that is, of course, the Nikon ZR. Now, the Nikon ZR has a lot of really kind of like interesting features. You got the IBIS, which is fantastic, which you don't actually have in the C50, and you do have in the FX3. Which is fantastic. You've got a 24 megapixel sensor, but you've also got 32-bit float audio internal for everything. And that was a crazy experience for me because I literally shouted. I got the camera, I was just like, and I brought the audio down and it was fine. It was just like, ah. You know what I mean?
Because that's the thing about float audio is it's basically levels. Like setting your levels has almost become irrelevant.
Yeah.
In many ways. Yeah.
No, definitely. Like genuinely, I when I put the card in and put up the red raw footage that has the bit float, which is actually talk about That has the 32-bit float. I was just like, I put it on there. My laptop just started shaking with the audio, right? And then I brought it down, and it was just like, well, that's actually manageable, and it's to the point where you wouldn't actually need to have a microphone on it. The audio is that good, which actually comes into an interesting kind of thing, which I feel like needs to be fixed via the firmware of the camera. Whereas the fact if you shoot RAW, you can't actually use the mic directional ability. You can only use the 32-bit stereo audio that has built into the clip, which for people that are if people are using it to shoot RAW, it doesn't necessarily really matter, because that's just going to be your audio, what's it called? There's a term for it. Scratch audio, right? That's just, to sync things up to the better mic system, right? But if you were tempted to shoot the raw footage, which is a ludicrous thing for like day-to-day usage, and you wanted that direction ability, I mean, it's just a little bit like weird. But the Nikon ZR, really awesome. I think September did more for me to kind of reinvigorate for like tech just in general, as I can see kind of like a lot of like pathway things can go. Also really excited about general Fuji cameras. I've actually recently bought myself an XC5. That camera, I absolutely love. It's always going to be popular. And that, I mean, the X100 is a camera that kind of like a derivative of, the original kind of like version of the XC5, whatever. That camera did so popular because of TikTok. He ended up becoming massive because of that. That's where social media comes into the effect. But also when it comes to things that we don't necessarily sell, that I'm actually really excited for when it comes over to camera technology. And I'd love to get your point of view on this, on one of the subjects, but I'll start with the other first. And that is the Ray-Ban Meta display glasses. Mm-hmm. Now, what I find fascinating about that is for cameras that are more rangefinder-esque or, SLRs, Pentax, right, Leica, having the ability to have a heads-up display that's not like the hybrid one out of the Fuji where it just pops up, where it's there. You can see what the camera's actually seeing as a heads-up display in the thing. I think it's actually going to be a really powerful tool, and it'll be interesting to see how they apply that to technology in the future. The one that I would like to get your opinion on is with the advent of the iPhone 17 Pro Max and the square sensor on that. Do you think sensors for camera technology in the future are going to have square sensors rather than your 35mm sensor?
I think sensor technology in smartphones will have to develop, obviously, because I've always thought that one of the biggest problems that you have in a phone in general, unless you want your phone to be massive, right? It's basically the size of the aperture, and therefore the lens, and therefore the size of the sensor. And the thing with that is, so my theory with this stuff, I've mentioned this before, is that the ability of an iPhone, the iPhone 16, 17 Pro, whatever, to produce computational photography is amazing. It's actually light years ahead of a lot of the camera manufacturers. Yeah. Okay, so take subject tracking, take all lots of different things. What I would like to see, right, would be companies like Nikon or Canon. To make a camera where you take your iPhone and you click it on the back of it, and it can...
That's happened before, though.
But that must happen again, because then you can really, as a camera, you could take advantage of some of the computation.
So I am a massive fan, right, of the time of technology where things were weird, man. And you had things like that, like Sony released their, I think it was like an NEX5 that you just attach to the back of there, and you can use the Sony lenses. And at the time, it's probably a bit terrible to what it is these days. But it was cool. But also like the weird looking kind of like, what's it called? The floppy disk cameras, like those kind of stuff. I think through the fact that in this day and age, the cameras that I really love, right, are the ones that have decided to look at the formula and be like, do you know what? Let's chuck it away. See what we can do. So Sigma decided to be like, you know what? Let's do a camera that's a little bit like an iPhone. or like what Apple would do if they created a camera.
Yeah.
They create this beautiful, stupid thing, which is the is it FP? But no, it's BF, isn't it? The Sigma BF.
Yeah.
And I love their tagline, beautiful foolishness, right?
Yeah.
That I praise them. Like, that genuinely was the most interesting thing for camera design that has happened in a really long time. Because people and camera manufacturers need to not be afraid to be a little bit weird.
Yeah. There's sort of a, I tell you two stories, actually, one about weird, but generally, I've gotten round to sort of appreciating simplicity. Nowadays I sort of appreciate things that are not all singing and dancing, but can do one thing really, really well. My best example is coffee machines. Right?
Brilliant, love them.
I've just
addicted to them.
I just come back from Germany, right? And all of my relatives over there have like all singing, all dancing. You pour the beans in the top, and you've got 5 million different programs of different things you can do with all sorts of fancy coffee nonsense, and they're horrendously expensive machines, incredible from a technology point of view, what they can do, blah, 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 blah. They talk to the internet and whatever. All of that's super fancy. I just realized that, I spent 2 weeks with my parents, basically. And throughout the whole 2 weeks, we only ever used the very same Word program. So I'm kind of immediately thinking, And then I'm also thinking, the Americano in a coffee, from the coffee machine it's okay, but it's not the best I've ever had. So, so I thought I need to think about this a different way. And as it happens, by sheer coincidence, we were just in the process of buying a new coffee machine, our old coffee machine given up, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So I figured, you know what? I don't need an all singing, all dancing coffee maker. I need a machine that does one thing, i.e. filter coffee, really, really well.
Yeah.
So I found a thing called the Mocha Master, which is absolutely beautiful. It's
a brilliant name. Love it.
It does only one thing. It makes coffee, right? It has one button. It's on and off. That's it.
Oh, nice.
There's no kerfuffle.
That's all you need.
That's all you need, man. It's the best coffee I've had in a long time, and it's just one thing.
I always liked I think we got one in the cabinet because we got like a collection of gold cameras, but we've got like a Minolta cigarette tin camera or something like that. There's a few like that, just like things you can't necessarily shoot with anymore, but they're just kind of like really quite cool.
Yeah. I saw some spy cameras some time ago, and it's like, oh, okay, that looks really interesting,
Yeah. No, it's crazy. I can't wait to see where technology goes. I really can't.
Yeah.
I think like last month especially, because there's a few kind of just like outliers there that I was like, that would be really cool. And what I said earlier about the iPhone, I mean, having the sensor squared in a mirrorless body, so like a larger format squared sensor that's not 35 mil.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if that's going to be something that's going to be used, like will we see Sony's or like other things? Because it'll be better than OpenGate essentially, because it'll be you'll be able to do both crops. Yeah,
it'd be interesting. I mean, it's always interesting to see where that goes. I think 15 years ago, I don't know if anybody could have predicted mirrorless technology.
Well, who did it first? Canon, I think. Oh yeah, because that's the funny one. It's like Canon's just like, we're going to do a mirrorless camera, and then it's like, nobody likes it. We're going to stop doing it, and then they started doing it again, and it's just like,
well, but they only started really getting into it because Sony, started, digging up the market share. I mean, that's because Sony.
That's what happened, right? So crazy. So you got your DSLRs. Sony take over Minolta, and they produce this thing called the SLT, which is single lens translucent. So it has a two-way mirror like there, so you can take a photo but also view it. Yeah, view via the viewfinder. And then they have the cinema range, and they start introducing E-mount lenses to that, because a lot of the original glass was actually more cinema orientated, and then they start playing around with a few full frame kind of stuff. But Canon actually, they've done the M series. I think they actually did one before that as well. I'm not quite sure. But they very much tried it out, and they were like, this is not going to become a thing. It's never going to become a thing. People are like DSLRs. And what I think people need to understand is we had film photography that ended up going bust because of digital, right? And there was always going to be a point where EVS will improve to the point where they are good enough to be able to be used better than optical. So I know, that was the next stage.
Yeah.
Go over to there. And it's going to be one of those things where, like, there's always going to be the next stage, and people tend to be like, well, this is not going to happen. And now I don't think that's necessarily going to happen with people just going to move over to AI photography, because I think experience is the thing, right? So it's just like, this. So there's something in the industry that's going to happen. I don't know what it is. That's going to change over. And it's been funny to watch the other brands do mirrorless over the year and then eventually try it. So, like, the Nikon Z camera started to come out, and then Canon released the USR. Pentax just in the corner, being Pentax. Not really much from them other than the Ricoh GR3, of course, or GR5, 4, 5 now. And then you've got the really quite. Actually, to be fair, I'd say, like, Pentax didn't do anything. They actually did do the Q series mirrorless cameras. Have you ever seen one?
I don't think I have, actually.
Oh my god, you need to go on a browser right now and check it out. Okay. So back in the day, Pentax did these Q Auto 110 lenses, which is like this nice little film, and it's in my hand it looks absolutely tiny because I've got massive hands, because it's like, I don't know if I've got anything on my desk that could show the size of it. They're tiny. Anyway, they released a digital one, and the sensor on it has a 7.1 times crop to the lenses. So, like, the lenses are like 2mm to 32mm, because it ends up being just like a 70 to 300 or something like that, because it's just that amount of crop, right? And they're cute. People become interested in them again. Weird tech. It's weird tech. It's like kind of a cool design.
Yeah.
And then Nikon did a version of it, which is the Nikon 1 system. And then they abandoned it and then went to this Z system, because the Nikon 1 system was, again, tiny sensor, massive amount of crop. Kind of okay, not fantastic. So, like, it was interesting to see camera manufacturers adopt the APS-C or, like, tiny factor without necessarily considering the future of the technology. And Sony went into that really well. Fujifilm couldn't have gone better for them, really, because they used Nikon mount for the DSLRs beforehand. And it's interesting to see their kind of, like, growth. And they've vastly become one of the most kind of, like, well appreciated brands, I think, when it comes to the photography. Sony, again, very well appreciated, great manufacturers of some of the most reliable mirrorless cameras on the market at the moment. I would actually argue they're probably the most reliable. And Nikon doing, like, heaps and bounds, creating some of the best stuff, right? But for a really long time, because they're such an old company, people view them as an old camera, right?
Yeah.
Which is why I think the red system has kind of, like, really helped.
Well,
excite them, because it's literally the polar opposite to that company.
Exactly, and so is the Z8, for example. The Z8 and the Z9, when they first kind of waited so long to release the Z8, that I remember it was for years and years. People like, are they going to bring out a Z8? Because the original. The original Z cameras they still left a lot to be desired. And I remember I bought a Z6 II, which was a lot better than the original Z6, but still, the autofocus was good, but it wasn't. You couldn't really compare it to a Canon, for example. But when the Z9 came out, that was a complete game changer. And the Z8 is just a beautiful, for me, as somebody who's a hybrid shooter, it's a really nice kind of hybrid camera, because the video is really good. The stills are amazing. It's just a really great all-round camera. I am really interested. I'm really interested in the Nikon red collaboration thing. That's
the Nikon ZR is perhaps one of the best webcams on the market. I think the Canon, I'm probably going to be getting the Canon, actually, to be honest, just because it fits me as a professional a little bit, but it's close, right? I might end up just getting both. because they're just cool. Because the ZR, you know, being able to adapt E-mount lenses, that's just cool. You know, and overall it's a really powerful system. I love the screen on it. I love what it could do for me. I just want all the cameras, man. It's so hard picking these days.
It's very difficult.
I'm just gonna say go buy everything. Do it, and make sure you do it via Camera Center. That's what we take away from this.
That's it. All right, of course, let me just say that, you know, just in closing, all the links will be in the description below.
Yeah.
So no matter whether you're watching this on YouTube or on audio, you know, go check it out. Stuart, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. I'm sure it's not going to be...
I feel like, by the way, I don't know if it was kind of like me coming to an end there. I don't know. But like, I feel like I could have talked to Dan on this for another couple hours. Like I've actually got to go do things, and I'm like,
we gotta do. I tell you what we could do is we're gonna have to put an episode or so together where we really only talk about products, because that would be super interesting.
Oh, for sure.
Because there's so much happening in the industry at the moment. Stuart, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. And it's
been a pleasure talking to you too. Just to let you know. It's been happy.
Fantastic. Thanks, man. Okay, folks, that's it for today. What a pleasure having Stuart on the show, sharing how Camera Center UK has managed to stay strong on the high street, connect with younger photographers, and stand out in a fiercely competitive market. And as always, before we go, let me just recommend another episode that I think you'll love. Check out episode 276, where we talk to the godfather of photography, Rick Salmon. Go check that out. And if you enjoy our content, consider supporting us on buymeacoffee.com/camerashake. It really does mean the world to us and helps us keep creating more exciting episodes. And don't forget, head over to www.camerashakepodcast.com and sign up to the mailing list, because we've got some incredible stuff coming up very soon, so you'll know about it first. And for those of you listening to the audio version, did you know there's a fully fledged video version over on YouTube with plenty of examples of our guest photography in full Technicolor? Well, you should by now, because I mention it all the time. Just search for Camera Shake Podcast on YouTube, and you can watch all past episodes on there. And if you're already on YouTube, drop us a comment, hit the like button, ring the bell, and share with your friends. Your engagement helps us reach a wider audience all over the world. Now, that being said, I shall see you again next Thursday.